I think having that dual view of both the board view and the operator view really equips leaders for much more holistic thinking and kind of sensitivities to the business.
I think the key thing for me is to continue to bring that customer obsession into the day-to-day as the company is continuing to evolve, and making sure that we're reaching out to our customers, understanding where they're at, spending time with them, bringing in those customer specific videos to show how they're, really utilizing our experiences.
Welcome everyone to the Design Executive Podcast. I'm so delighted to welcome Jyoti Shukla, who is currently SVP Experience Design at SiriusXM Pandora. She brings a wealth of experiences for us to unpack today in this design podcast to talk about what it means to have a long game in design leadership. We'll unpack kind of a remarkable career spanning Microsoft, Starbucks, Nordstrom, becoming a board member at KEXP, and also today in her role as the experience design leader at SiriusXM. Welcome, Jyoti.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here, Gordon. Really appreciate it.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's a Friday, so it's a nice day in Seattle. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm so delighted to have seen you just the other day as we were having a lovely discussion and preparing for this podcast. I'd love to, for you to introduce yourself a little bit, because I think you have quite an interesting background coming up in the design industry. I do know you started with a business background, but you have had quite a transformation through your career. So give us a little bit of a rundown.
Sure. So I actually come from Seattle. I was born and brought up on the East Coast, but my family moved over to the West Coast. My parents were first, sort of generation Indian, came here to really build a life, build a new life, and had 3 daughters. I'm right in the middle. And I was really passionate about a variety of things: music, entertainment. Kind of grew up with a lot of different, going to concerts and shows. Design was always in there as well as part of like my passion. And when I went to college at University of Washington, I did go for a business degree, but on the side, I was always playing music, performing with my younger sister in bands, and really kind of thinking about that connection between creative and sort of the business side. And then throughout my kind of schooling and things like that, I was very passionate about, this idea of a customer experience. And when I started getting into the industry, that is really what drives me and fuels me, is like that user connection, the customer experience. And so when I started my career at places like you mentioned, Microsoft, working at Xbox, which is one of the most, fun, exciting places. I remember being in the environment when the Xbox Live launch happened. Gaming with, people other than within your own family or in your home. So seeing how customers are impacted by change, by great technology, how do you really kind of focus in on that? And then from there, I went to Starbucks for a good amount of time, about 8.5 years. And there I was lucky enough to work on the music team, really driving the design and product for a variety of different experiences, but namely the Starbucks app, which I think a lot of people probably continue to use. And we, at the time when we were building it, didn't really, we certainly had a vision for it, but didn't know it was going to be as successful as it is. And so at a time when, it was brand new to the market and trying to gain momentum and getting energy in the environment that we were in with coffee, but also the idea of like making things fast and easy and feasible for our customers, it was a really important part of the journey of my career. And I really enjoyed the experience working at Starbucks and leading teams. And that's really when I got a lot of foundation with beautiful execution, design, brand, all those things kind of came through. Also at Xbox as well. And then from there, I was lucky enough to go to Nordstrom for about 6.5 years. And I worked building the UX design organization. There was a leader there who was wonderful, and she moved on. And so I was able to build the team quite into a scenario where we were kind of going across every big business line, and going from sort of coffee to fashion was an important shift in my career. But, over about 15, 16 years in retail for a long time. So really got into the rhythm of what it means to serve a customer, to meet a customer halfway, to understand the challenges that our customers face. And so just that piece around not only music, but customer connection. So during the pandemic, in a very dark time. A lot of us were going through a lot of change, challenges. And I was thinking about some of the passions I had in my life. And I was lucky enough to be asked to join the KEXP board at the time. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that. And it really kind of mapped to the passion around, supporting community in the Seattle area and beyond. And also, I had been doing some work with them for a few years and was excited to be part of something bigger. And there was a lot of change happening in that environment. And then I got a call from SiriusXM, and I loved working at Nordstrom, still love that brand, love the people. And however, it really, SiriusXM Music, Pandora, as I mentioned before, it's such a passion for me. So I think that it made sense to take a jump, a leap. And quite frankly, there weren't any other technology leaders in Seattle that were working at the company. So I was lucky to kind of be one of the first out here. And you just came to our office like the other day. And so you got to see that we've got an office here in South Lake Union. And so I lead the design research, content strategy, sort of experience design led team here. And it's been a joy. It's been about almost 5 years. So it's gone by quickly. And so it's an interesting experience because it's starting a new role, a big role, during a time where I didn't get to meet anybody for about a year. And it was because of COVID. And how do you do that in a way where you can build momentum and community and connection in a company that's really based out of, say, Oakland and New York, where there's not really a Seattle presence, but that's changed quite considerably in the last several years. So been here, enjoying it, a lot of different work and products that we're doing. Yeah, so that's kind of me in a nutshell. So hopefully that answers your question, Gordon.
Yeah, and I think what'll be exciting is, I've definitely used that Starbucks app. I think a lot about those stars that fall around and, all the
Yes.
lovely interactions. I'm also a gamer, but I'm thinking specifically for your life today at KEXP, what that board, we're going to talk about that for the audiences, but we're also going to talk about the fact that, at SiriusXM Pandora, give us a bit of a breadth of what you do, because I know that there's 150 monthly, listeners. It's quite an expansive portfolio of work. I think a lot of people might know about the experience through their cars, but so give us a little bit of color of what it is.
Yeah, so yeah, certainly 150 million unique listeners a month. There's SiriusXM, which is the experience in the car. We also have an app that we support, which is a big part of what my team drives and works on across all the different platforms, desktop, mobile, web. And we also work on a variety of back-end tools, whether it's the creator tools, like if you're a musician or an artist and you're trying to bring your music through Pandora. We're also connected to the Pandora experience. So my team is helping to drive some of those experiences as well. We have an area primarily focused on advertising. So the advertising revenue, advertising teams, how it shows up in the experiences, but also how the tools work for our advertisers and our users that are utilizing them. So there's a lot of different things that we're kind of driving. We have a whole growth and retention space, which is how do we bring our lapsed listeners or customers into the flow to make sure that they can join, which is very similar to sort of some of the e-commerce work that I've done at other places. So that lands really well within my organization and team. And we started off quite small in the sense that when I got here, there was not an experience design organization. It was pretty connected to sort of pieces of the business, but we brought in a variety of new leaders. We've kind of grown the discipline quite a bit. We have a whole design systems organization and team, a leader that runs that, design operations. And we're also very candidly connected to our marketing organization in a way that's very exciting for the future of the company. So it's been a joy. It's also been a lot of work to try to get our team to grow the way that I'd like it to grow and to sustain it and to fight for those things that we need for our customers. So it's been great.
Yeah, and imagine, as a musician yourself, like what is your favorite artist on that platform?
I mean, the platform has so much content. It is, certainly like if you think about Pandora, it is a lean back listening experience where you can start with a song and then you just continue to hear incredible music, new music that highlights things that are going on in your life. There are people and customers and loyalists that have, years and years of data that we've gathered that helps, kind of really talk about what the music genome project, which is a big part of what Pandora is about. And it's fantastic. And so I find that I start off with like a Sade song, and then I end up with Janet Jackson, then I'll go all the way to a Taylor song. And that's my kind of vibe in that platform. When I'm listening to SiriusXM in the car or on my app, like a lot of times I'm going to the Beatles, I'm going over, like I have kids that are, driving in the car with me. So I'm trying to influence them on music that I really do think like, are things that I grew up with. And so a lot of times on road trips, we'll just turn on the Beatles channel. I have two sons and my husband in the car. So we sometimes go to the, like Metallica or something very hard rock. I really love Hits One. I do listen to a lot of Conan. We have a variety of different experiences that you can participate in, and like the podcasts and such too. So it is full of everything you could possibly dream of in the content sphere for us.
Yeah. So I'm curious for you, you've been at this company for about almost 5 years. What is top of mind for you today in being a strategic design leader?
So I think the key thing for me is to continue to bring that customer obsession into the day to day as the company is continue to evolve, and making sure that we're reaching out to our customers, understanding where they're at, spending time with them, bringing in those customer specific videos to show how they're really utilizing our experiences. What are some dead ends? What are some things that are working really well? How do we connect the car and the phone together so it doesn't feel like it's two different experiences? Those are big parts of what my team is trying to drive and work on. We're also really excited about the world of advertising and where that's going. And so we've got some great ideation on how to kind of move that forward. And considering the fact that there are so many places you can get music, I mean, it's a very highly competitive market. So the other aspect that, really comes to mind is understanding the dynamics of change and really being resilient to the shifting pendulum of the work we have to do, the changing needs of the organization and the customer. Certainly in retail, that was the case as well. So it certainly prepped me well for this experience. And on top of it, sharing those insights and wisdom, if I can, with my team. So knowing something is a certain way one month, and the next month you get to it and you have to shift, you have to drive in a different way altogether. So those are the kinds of things that are on my mind when we're thinking about the future. The other aspect is strategic design, being at the table to help strategize the next set of initiatives that we're going to go drive, which is a big part of the work my leaders do, which has been a fantastic shift for us over the last few years since we've matured the design organization.
So when you say customer obsession, like what sort of future do you see for this kind of area of business?
Well, I mean, I think we all are curious and participating and learning much more about AI every single day. So our customers are doing that as well. There's expectations that are super high on how we can understand their needs and how we can know them better, our customers in particular, and how we can serve them. And I think that's the big thing that when I think about our customers and being obsessed is understanding the different demographics, the segmentation, the metrics that we have in place that we need to improve upon, and really trying to bring that human quality back to the experiences. So it's important, when you're thinking about a set of platforms, to ensure that you're thinking about it from the customer lens and the business lens, for sure. Like both are important. And so my goal is to consistently drive that human voice into those experiences and evolve them, as faster than we can right now, and continuing to build that momentum for speed. So using things like the design system, the engineering output, things like that can drive things forward. I also think that just being able to sit and learn and interested in, watching videos about customers that are going through challenging moments in our experiences, whether it was here or Starbucks, Nordstrom, it is so valuable to remember that you are not the customer we are building these things for. Like I try to remind my team that regularly. So it's that empathy, it's that human connection. It's the reason why someone decides to go press the play button on our experience versus going somewhere different that day. So what are the things that we're reminding ourselves on? And at the end of the day, like you can't really get away from that moment where you're listening to a song or a podcast or a host and you just resonate with them. How do we create that? What does that mean for a customer or user when we do those kinds of things?
And I suspect, you're mentioning about how much change and transformation you've witnessed in the music industry, streaming, all the things combined. How would you kind of give advice and insight to how you navigate these business shifts, these market shifts? What's the sort of insight for you around that?
That's a great question. I think that we're all going through it together, collectively as a human race right now. There's so much change, and I think as an entity of one person who's trying to drive change in the company, it is really important to remember that I have the privilege and the opportunity to serve my team. I think that's the number one thing, plus the customers. The customer is always, for me, in my forefront. My team is the other one. And so what are the things that I can ensure my team can create within their teams to create this energy of a culture that can be resilient and can move with the flow? And part of it is to really get deep into our practice and recognize that we are, I would say, very lucky, and I feel grateful that there's so much literature and practices and tools and things that we can use in times of change. So whether it's a workshop, whether it's getting together and doing a sketching session, whether it's taking a moment and saying we don't know how to solve this problem, and actually saying it out loud with a group and saying we're going to utilize this method to actually go out and do it. Those are moments of actually great joy for me, because it makes it a fun experience for design to really lead and facilitate and drive change. The other thing I do a lot of times is, because of the background that I come from, and part of a lot what I learned at Nordstrom is shifting from being a design leader to being a business leader. And that's what I really believe is important, because understanding the nuances of where the business is going, where the challenges are, makes you a stronger design leader altogether. And ultimately, that's kind of the goal of what we're all trying to do, right? So my thinking is also looking at the lens of where the business is at. So in fact, like if there's a company that I'm a part of and it's going through great change, like there's transformation, I recognize there's certain business principles and models and things that exist in order to be very successful there. If it's going through decline, that's a different scenario, right? Like there's a different set of stages. If it's going through growth, where you're just growing like crazy, and many of us have been part of that, it sounds really amazing, but it's also like the pace. How do you keep up, right? There's so much demand for that. So the first step is to kind of go, where am I? Like, let's just be self-aware about where the business is. And then you can kind of coach and teach your team around you to say, okay, we're in a bit of a different place than we were like 5 years ago, 3 years ago. Let's now utilize different tools for the place we're at today. The other thing I would say is, with everything, we're all a group of individuals and people that are working together. I think relationships are not only the most important, but they're actually bring you so much positive joy and energy at work. And so being able to say, through the last several, years or decades, I guess, building relationships with a variety of different product leaders, engineering leaders, AI experts, people outside or inside the company, that is really helps me stay not only stable, but gives me inspiration. I would just admit, Gordon, when you and me and a bunch of us from Seattle were together, that just gave me a bounce of energy, because we were talking about opportunities and things we're doing together as a group, but also challenges. So inspiring yourself to look beyond and try to find ways to network outside. And then the last thing I would just say is, it's easy to say go with the flow, but it's kind of like part of what you need to do as a leader, and set aside some of the time for the processing of what's happening. So some people like to process like, wow, there's been so much change in my company, the world is changing, and it can feel like you're sort of imploding. So what I try to do is find time in my day, in my week, in my weekend, to process information and things that are happening. I don't always do it perfectly. There's no way that I could, but I do have a lot of different ways with, I have a coach that I work with. I do a lot of meditation. I love to play music. I spend time with my kids. None of that stuff becomes secondary to this. It's all very important in order to do these kinds of roles, and not only these roles, but just in general to be out there making a difference.
Yeah, I think something to highlight in your career is the fact that you really stay in those roles and last the course and even go through job evolutions. And I think there's something to be said about the rituals or practices that you've kind of instilled. So let's look back, right? So Starbucks, that was almost 9 years.
Yes.
Nordstrom, 6 years. Now you're approaching 5 years. You've served as a board member also at KEXP for nearly 5 years. So let's talk a little bit about, just what do you kind of see through such a long duration of holding a role and through multiple roles at a company? You mentioned a little bit about you're definitely paying attention to where's the business now today, and then how do we adapt the right tools and practices against that, and not just kind of staying fixed to just one method. What are some of kind of those nuances that you're noticing that you're now also sitting on the board side of an organization that you might not have learned prior to sitting on a board? And like, what do you kind of see in the toggle shift between operator and kind of board?
Absolutely. And it is very true that making the decision to stay is a decision that you make, right? So for me, I do believe that in order to do the kinds of things I'm excited about doing, it takes some amount of time, like especially as a leader, to build a presence and energy, a culture, a whole new design, view for the company. It takes more than a year, right? So, and every year is very different depending on where the business is taking you, right? So there's a lot of different organizational changes or mandates that occur, and just in general, the economy and the customer experience changes over time. I tend to be somebody who enjoys building relationships over time. So that's the other thing, is when I start enjoying the connections I'm making with people, I start realizing this is a great opportunity to do even more here. So that might just be my personality style. The other part that I will say, related to the board, which is a great question, when I started being part of the KEXP board, it is a very different role to be an operator than a board member. And I've had the opportunity to do some real great work to learn about this over time, not only from coaches, but also from board members, other people that I've got to connect with. And it's so much more important to be an incredibly active listener, which is something that I'm continuing to grow in. And the other aspect is really understanding the overall business of where a particular, KEXP is a nonprofit, but in general, as a board member, understanding the business elements and also understanding the makeup of what makes a successful board member, which is very different than an operator, where you're going in there and you're actually doing the work and you're presenting to a board and you're responsible for the entire end-to-end experience. But you walk in there in a board member role where you're really trying to advise, you're trying to coach, you're trying to nurture, you're trying to ask the right precision questions. And that's been really a fun experience for me to gain some of that knowledge, because a lot of what I've learned in the board world has helped me become a better operator from my perspective.
Yeah.
Because in order to grow individuals, it is important to coach and guide and not necessarily say, this is where I think you should go. It's about giving them challenges or even making a different perspective shift in their mindset. So those are the kinds of things that certainly help. Not only that, but understanding there's a way things work on a board that are just available to from my perspective. It gave me a lot of insight into how all the boards that I've kind of been a part of, in the sense of presenting to boards or creating board materials. And it's been a really fun experience to do both of them at the same time. When I was at Nordstrom, it was a relief to go in some cases to KEXP, because I was connecting to music. And I loved being able to go from fashion to music. And now I'm working in music and going into the nonprofit space of music. So I feel very grateful, honestly, to have been able to be part of that.
Yeah, I mean, you're really a music executive as much as a design executive feels like. I think a lot about this toggle shift, and I think this is a very important part for any leader listening, whether they're a designer or a business person. I think having that dual view of both the board view and the operator view really equips leaders for much more holistic thinking and kind of sensitivities to the business. What would you say is precision questioning? Let's unpack that a little, because I think that's something we highlighted at our roundtable just a few days ago,
Yes.
and also in this call. And I feel that is such a powerful skill for any strategic leader.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, I know there's a lot of different versions of it out there probably, but it's really trying to get to the root of what is happening or the problem that we're trying to solve. And a lot of times it can be not necessarily anyone's fault, but it's masked by timeline or what we've done before all the time, a scenario where things are not working out, but we're not like getting down to the nitty gritty. And in a way, being a board member, you're not there every day. You're not actually in the trenches with the team. So you can ask questions like, what is the decision making that you went through, or the framework that got you to this particular point, or what are the kinds of things you didn't decide to go with, or how did your customers react to the change? And it comes from a place of it certainly comes from a place of questioning, not necessarily what they're doing, but how they are thinking, right? So that's been a big part of it. And I've utilized that a lot at my own job because it does help in that way as well. And so those things kind of come through, but it's really trying to get to the place where you can unpack all of the specific things that are holding maybe a question down, and then you get underneath it. And then suddenly it's like, oh, that's the question you're asking. And I don't know the answer to that. That's okay. You don't know the answer. Let's go figure that out together. So it's layers and layers of the onion that you're trying to peel such that you can get to the bottom. I will tell you that my oldest son, is the best precision questioning person I've ever met. He will ask me questions till the evening hours on every subject. And so I've been certainly trained by my own kids in this experience, but it's that curiosity, and I think that's what the childlike energy brings. You want to bring that energy. You don't want to be critically doing it, but that's my style, to be much more of a curious learner versus a critical learner.
Yeah. And I imagine, when I think about people who really last the course in different organizations, there's the dimension of politics, there's relationships, but also knowing when to push or maybe allow it to kind of like happen, right? And so that kind of sensitivity and tact to how you lead as a leader, but also at what point do you apply how much pressure. I would love to talk a little bit about, just your evolution over the multiple kind of stints you've had at different companies, and how has your mind kind of evolved about how to think about that as a leader?
Yes, I think it depends, especially in the design maturity as well. So if my goal is to come in the first 6 months or something, and I am goal to build a team, create an environment, my pacing is very different. It may be super action focused. Maybe the first 90 days it's about listening, learning, doing the right connections, building the relationships. No question. I mean, relationships are everything, but it is to be a bit dynamic in trying to find some wins early on, and showing that having this discipline as really driving is a key part of the company's trajectory. I think that's really important to sort of try to lay the foundation out in the first year. And it requires a lot of skill in building great relationships with people, learning, understanding, hearing the challenges that they've been facing, and being a great listener, being good at being empathetic, the kinds of things we talked about early on, just in that way of being human and really kind of going, what are the challenges you've seen over the few years that you've been here? Tell me what I could do to help. What are the things I can do to serve? So those are the things that come up for me when I'm beginning an experience. And I try very much to do that with my team as well, because they have also, if they've been there for a period of time, they know a lot more than I do. And they will provide so much background and so much help and historical knowledge. So that is really kind of crucial for the beginning stages. As you continue to grow and you know where you're headed, then it's about setting a clear strategy alongside the business and the product teams, engineering, and driving it as an organization together. And then it can pick up, the pace just picks up like crazy. You start developing ideas, different types of scenarios, your team starts growing. There's an environment of change, positivity. There's also expectations that are, hugely large. And so you're trying to always connect those back to the business and the customer needs. So it really depends on, where you're at. And then you're going through a lot of, change just in general with the industry. So keeping a track of what's happening competitively, what's happening with, customer value, what are they spending money on? So those are all aspects of things that matter. But I really do prioritize relationships as a very top part, as much as I do with the customer experience. And so I love to, make that a big part of why design is successful, because if we can build bridges across teams, we can change the company. We certainly can with our design practices.
Kind of in this last section here, like, what do you often have noticed through the course of your career about common pitfalls that you are seeing design leaders make that you think would really transform our effectiveness if we paid a little bit more attention to?
That's a great question. I think the first one would just be not having that business and customer mindset. A lot of times there have been, moments just in general career wise where perhaps myself or others just didn't see that business need and either ignored it or could have done a better job of understanding it so we could meet the business leader halfway or even further. So really keeping the business as a part of your picture, and whether that means you spend time with the business leader and they help coach you, which I've done many, many times, or you go back to school and learn something. There's lots of online stuff, but it's just in general getting curious about the business side. The other thing is, you mentioned it earlier about adaptability, flexibility, openness. We have got to be super curious, open to the next generation of what's going to happen. And it's almost like, if you think about music, I mean, that's where I come back to my passion is, there are times when I'm singing or performing and it just doesn't work, right? And I have to be open to the feedback and to the changes and to the opportunity, and remembering it's a craft. It's not something that's ever going to end, right? It's a practice. And so keeping that in my forefront is important. So assuming that you have a fixed thing and you can do the same fixed thing every single place you go, that's not the case. And building the team at Nordstrom was an incredible experience. And there are so many things that I learned from that. I am not doing the exact same thing at Sirius because they're not the same company. They're totally different businesses. The industries are completely different. And the types of goals, while they're business minded and customer focused, they're just different. So it's important not to, as a business leader, to walk in, design leader, and just try to say, well, I did this here, it better work over here. And you kind of put a lot of people under pressure as a result of this. So thinking of it almost like you're waking up every day in a new environment, and being curious about it. The last thing I would say that is one of the most important things is that strategic design lens. There are times when you get so crammed into the day to day, like, let's just get this out, let's do this A/B test, let's get the UX research report out, and you lose that sort of strategic lens. So I would just, one of the things that I've tried to do is, actually, because we're sort of dispersed like many companies are, you bring people together specifically for an event where you can say, we're going to talk about the future, we're going to talk about the innovation that's happening, we're going to talk about AI. So that way you can get out of the kind of day to day, which is still really important. But so those are things like, if you don't look at the sort of future, you're going to get caught, at some point. So those are things that I think a design leader should keep an eye on.
Yeah. And kind of to think, to end it here, I really think about, there is this power to being extremely thoughtful about how you diagnose the situation and then respond with a thoughtful approach to that, right? Rather than a rinse and repeat. What sort of advice would you give to your younger self now that you know what you know?
Oh my gosh. I honestly, I would just say my younger self was probably more worried than I needed to be about a lot of things that don't really matter as much. So the intuition comes with wisdom and time. So that's something I would say is, as you're doing every day that's hard, every day that's a grind, every day that's fantastic, you are learning things every single day, every minute, right? That's just how our brains are wired. And so you don't need to know what's going to happen in the next 15 years. I try to tell myself that all the time, even still. And but even when I was young, like, I was very concerned, especially in my early, mid to late 20s, what is it that I was going to really, embark on here? And part of it is, I would say, just continue to do the things you love to do, align with wonderful people that bring you joy and fun and excitement. And when you get an opportunity that sparks your interest, pivot and move toward it, and just know you can trust your gut on those things, because you know yourself best, right? Like, when you close your eyes and you just say, should I do this? And it says, yes, and if it says no, you know that it's not the right thing. So just don't ignore those whispers, as I've heard it be called, and don't ignore the very loud no's that come in through your intuition, because we're so much more wise than we think we are. So that's what I would say to myself.
Mm. Well, with that wisdom, I thank you for being here with us today. And I'm sure there's so much more conversations we're going to have. Thank you.
I love it. Thank you so much.